This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill.
I'm somewhat more comfortable collecting real estate than I am collecting other stuff.
This is the Collecting Real Estate Podcast. I'm your host, Stephen Purse, here with your co-host, Bill Hamill. This morning, we interviewed John Rickgarn. John is the owner of JHR Investments, as well as Wealth and Freedom Nexus, his own podcast and education platform. Bill, what'd you take away from this one?
Yeah, John's an awesome guest, awesome investor. He's just getting started. I love how he has that podcast platform and also investing in the smaller properties, but taking advantage of some of those passive investment opportunities on other sponsors' syndications.
Yeah, it's always refreshing to get a different perspective of how you can be a real estate investor. I feel like most people we interview try and scale up in one specific market. John says, "No, I'll stick with the smaller multifamily all around the country, and it works great for me. So you guys go do what you want to do, and I'm going to do what's working right now."
Yeah, to each his own. I did that for many years, buying the smalls and medium size. I back then I didn't know any better, but those properties did what they were intended to do. They build wealth no differently than anything else. And you'll know it when you think it's time to scale up into the much larger assets.
Absolutely, and you never even have to because you can keep collecting those smaller ones and keep building wealth and eventually refi out when all of them appreciate, like John talks about doing in the near future. So a lot to learn in this one. John Rickgarn, thank you for being here this morning. Excited for this interview. John owns JHR Investments as well as Wealth and Freedom Nexus, an education platform and podcast similar to this one. John, let's get right into it. Tell us how you got into real estate. Give us your background here.
Sure. Well, thanks for having me. Yeah, as far as my background in real estate, kind of started researching, educating myself late 2014 into 2015. Was kind of at that point of you don't know what you don't know. I just heard, real estate's a good investment. As far as getting actually started in real estate, started with the Fourplex here in my hometown of Marshall, Minnesota. Ironically, was vacant when we bought it, but we got it tenanted up with all four units. And kind of my unique spin on the story, since most people started the single family home and worked their way up, I actually pulled money out of my Roth IRA for the down payment of that fourplex. And like I said, that was almost 6 years ago, and been collecting real estate ever since.
Awesome. So you pulled money out of your Roth IRA for that first vacant fourplex.
Yeah, yeah, with the inner Susie Ortman and inner Dave Ramsey, screaming bloody murder. You should not be doing this. Yeah.
Was there any penalties involved with that? Did you have to go through any challenges to make that happen?
No, that was the interesting thing. So when this the fourplex came up, I mean, it checked all the boxes what I was looking for, but I mean, $300,000 property, 25% down payment. I mean, you can do the math. And I was thinking, of what Robert Kiyosaki always said: don't say I can't afford it, ask how can I afford it. And just through some conversations, our financial advisor just said, hey John, you've had this Roth IRA since you were 19. And I didn't know this. You can take your contributions out tax free, just not your earnings. And ran the numbers, and it's like, okay, that's the bulk of the down payment right there. And yeah, thankfully there was no taxes owed, no penalties, so that was a nice bonus.
I
Awesome.
always like
So it's just a matter of, when you want to get into real estate, you have to look at, okay, what kind of resources do I have and how
Mhm.
resourceful do you have to get? And sometimes if you're not able to utilize what's sitting there in your asset pool,
Mhm.
if you don't utilize that stuff from listening to Dave Ramsey and Susie Orman, you never get involved in real estate. And where would you be otherwise right now?
Exactly. Probably still slaving at a job 40, 50, 60 hours a week that I tolerated at best and hated at worst.
Hmm.
That's not what we do here. Our goal is to get away from that.
Exactly.
I like that quote of how can I afford it, not can I.
Yeah.
That's so essential for this game that we play here, collecting real estate. So, telling that story, what caught my attention even more than pulling it out of the Roth was buying a vacant fourplex. What was the
Yeah.
thought process behind that?
So, like I said, when I, educated myself for over a year of, real estate, learned about, the 1% rent to value rule, and, wanting something newer construction, not a lot of deferred maintenance and such. And that actually came up on the MLS. And the story behind it was the owners built it, early 90s, I think it was, and they lived in one unit and rent out the other three. And then one of the owners passed away, the other one moved into an assisted living, and then the I think it was three kids, they just, were far away, they didn't want to deal with leases, tenants, everything. So as the leases expired, they just let them, lapse and move out. And so yeah, it was a little unnerving that, buying a fourplex vacant right from the get go, but it was kind of a blessing where, okay, we can start fresh. You're not inheriting bad tenants. We also did some preventive maintenance. We actually put in a drain tile system in the basement of it, because we tend to get a lot of flooding with our clay soil around here. And knock on wood, we haven't had any water problems in the basement since. So,
Well, and certainly a great challenge grabbing a vacant fourplex, which, in the short term basis, it's certainly a challenge because you don't have a
mhm.
full building where you're able to just hit the ground running after that closing. But what I do see based on, being in this business for a long time is, wow, what a learning opportunity you have with this vacant fourplex.
Yeah.
You have to probably do a little bit of work to the units to make them move in ready. Now you have
Hmm.
to get the right tenants in these units, because what we have learned in this business is your success or failure is based on who you put into these units.
Yeah.
What did that look like?
So we kind of another caveat with my real estate journey, if you will. My wife, who was fully on board, she said, I'm good to go with this, but we're getting a property manager. We're not doing this by ourselves. So that was actually, I checked into it where I found a property management company before we even found the property. And they were actually excited to take on the property. They said, I don't think you'll have a problem, filling this. As it turns out, I want to say a week after we closed, we already had someone that wanted to move in, and like they needed it yesterday. So we took a look at all four units. It's like, okay, this one, was recently painted, newer carpet, really just kind of a cleaning touch up. Okay, move in ready, and then just kind of moved in from unit to unit after that. So obviously, one unit isn't going to cover all the expenses, but after 1 week to get one already tenanted, that definitely helped a lot.
Your wife sounds pretty smart.
Yeah, well, she's got a doctorate, so she should be.
There we go. There's something definite that helps you scale faster when you have that management in place. You're not managing every tenant yourself, and you're not a full-time manager.
Hmm.
You mentioned having the clay soil around you. Where is that?
So I live in Marshall, Minnesota, Southwest Minnesota. Geography wise, think about 60 miles from the Iowa border and 60 miles from the South Dakota border. So, home of Schwann's ice cream, Red Baron pizza. So,
Sounds like middle of nowhere to me. Probably
yeah, pretty
beautiful.
much. Yeah. I just the other day I was having a conversation with someone. It's like, oh, you should do real estate meetups. Why don't you just go up to the Twin Cities? I'm like, that's about a 3.5 hour drive for me. So,
Yeah, it's a
How
lot.
funny! A lot of times we focus on some of the demographics of these areas, making sure that we have a variety of employers in our rental markets and stuff. Seeing that your wife has the doctorate and you're jumping into real estate, which to her I'm sure was a conversation between the two of you at the time. And you're in this small market in Minnesota. Do you continue to build that portfolio in this location, or are you getting into other areas?
I've gotten into other areas, so not aggressively pursuing Minnesota, but I mean if the right property came up, I would certainly look at it. Like I said, 2016 started with a fourplex. My next acquisition was actually in Wilmer, about 70 miles north of Marshall. Ironically, back to the benefits of a property management company, that came as an off-market lead from our property management company itself, and that's actually been our cash cow ever since. With it's a duplex. We actually rent out the garages for storage to another tenant, if you will, and then has a coin operated shared laundry on it too. So that property's actually done very well for us.
So you are mostly staying in that Minnesota area. That's the plan moving forward.
So they got the two properties in Minnesota, but then also have properties in Arizona, Iowa, Alabama, and Tennessee.
All right.
So is that 5 states?
How do you build systems being so spread out across the country?
So it all really just comes down to property management companies, and I'm always a big believer of having a plan B. So every market that we're in, I always at least have connections or contacts, if you will, of a second property management company. Years ago, I was listening to a podcast, and one guy, think he said he had like 40 units or 30 units or something in, I want to say it was Memphis, and just out of the blue, his property manager, I should say, decided to retire. So he was left scrambling trying to find a new management company for 30 or 40 units. So that's kind of one thing I've always had in my back pocket of, okay, vetting the property managers. I've met plenty of good ones. I've met even more horrible or at best subpar ones, and then just kind of after that it's more of managing the managers at that point. So
Yeah, it's challenging. It's certainly a specialty business. Yeah, there's
mhm.
there's there's great managers out there, but as you mentioned, I agree with you. There's probably a heck of a lot more subpar management companies than they are good ones. So I can see the challenge if
Mhm.
your manager retires in another state, you're left having to find another one,
Yep.
and you're not local. So yeah, that's something that you're wise to keep on the top of your head. In these other states, are you buying fourplexes, duplexes? What's your deal criteria there?
So as far as deal criteria, I'm all about cash flow and generally look for long term rentals. The one exception was our condo in Arizona. That was kind of a hybrid, wanting a second home place to visit when we see family. We're actually going out there in about 3 weeks, and then using it as a short term rental when we're not there. But primarily, I don't know, it seems to be kind of going by the wayside, but try to look for the 1% rule for rents versus purchase price. Obviously, with the market as it is, 0.8, 0.9, if need be. The last acquisition I had was actually an off-market deal in Davenport, Iowa. Ironically, connected with another podcaster, and in California, and that was a duplex purchased back in October, so October last year.
So Bill and I usually preach the lower no money down method of real estate investing. Your first purchase came out of your Roth, so it's kind of like a lower no money down. It's not directly out of your bank account. What's been your method for getting into these different assets?
So kind of a combination. Or I say we, my wife and I didn't even know this was a term until one of my friends, but we were called the Dinks, double income, no kids at the time. So right, wrong, or indifferent, you have a lot more, disposable income per se. We weren't driving, brand new Cadillacs with car payments or had a, obnoxiously large mortgage payment or anything like that. So it was kind of a combination of savings, building it up. Even the last duplex actually worked with our local bank, and we um, think about put about $2,000 down just for closing costs, appraisal, etc. But the down payment was actually a second lien mortgage on our portfolio loan with our duplex and fourplex in Minnesota, and then a quote standard 75% loan to value loan for the rest of it, a 20-year period with a 20-year amortization with a 10-year balloon payment. Excuse me.
Awesome. Listening to all of that, it takes me back to the beginning of our discussion where on the personal side, and I can agree with this. We do focus on what Dave Ramsey says. You're not driving around the $100,000 vehicles. You don't have that obnoxious mortgage payment. All great stuff, all great information that they do preach. But on that real estate investment side, the key to growth is utilizing leverage in real
Hmm.
estate. It's an absolute no brainer. So many people have really exponentially grown their business with
Hmm.
large assets utilizing leverage. Do you
Right.
have any ambition to scale into much larger multifamily?
So as far as the scaling, I have invested in some syndications. I mean, I kind of consider that real estate investing, even though I'm not a general partner or
Absolutely.
direct owner, if you will. So as far as anything larger, might be open to it. I do like the 1 to 4 units, just with the Freddie Fannie Mae lending guidelines, kind of the 30-year mortgage, low interest rates. Going forward, actually next year, looking to do a large refinance across my portfolio with taking advantage of the large equity gains that I think just about everyone's experienced in the last couple of years in real estate, and deploying that capital elsewhere at that point.
Nothing wrong with collecting a large portfolio of 1 to 4 units. It's a great way to build wealth.
Hmm.
Bill and I often talk about filling buckets because it's such a team sport and there's so many different areas that need to be thought of and filled when you're investing in real estate, whether it's raising the capital or being the asset manager or the bookkeeper. What would you say is your skill set in real estate investing? What bucket do you fill?
Probably the biggest thing that I do, and I um, almost get to the point of analysis paralysis. I just say I'm pathologically methodical, but looking at the numbers, kind of conservative underwriting, as you will, as far as property taxes, insurance, obviously the operating expenses, what to leave for capex and maintenance. One kind of back to my fourplex. One interesting thing I learned of, and to date I've only seen mentioned in one PDF, was when purchasing property. Make sure or look into the property taxes and see if there's a homestead exclusion. That was the one oversight I had with my fourplex. With the previous owners living in it, they had a pretty decent exclusion, homestead exclusion for the property taxes. We purchased it. Fast forward a year later, property taxes jumped up quite a bit. I'm like, well, the value didn't go up. What's going on here? And then when I looked into it, it's like, okay, that was one oversight I didn't even think about. So I don't take just at face value what the property taxes are, when whether it's a turnkey or an off market, say, oh, the property taxes are 2 grand. I go on the county website, I look to see what the breakout is, when was the last time I was assessed, sometimes even call the assessor office, of trying to gauge of, okay, they have this market value of 80,000, but we're looking at purchasing it for 110. Is it wrong to assume that there would be a jump in property taxes after that? So.
It's a great tip.
Yeah, we experienced that in New York. One of the many benefits investing in New York. I hate to always focus on the challenges that have been presented to us over the past 5 or 6 years, but when we buy stuff locally, our even if we're buying a property for much higher than that assessed value,
Hmm.
fortunately, we don't see that drastic increase in our property taxes. Where
Okay.
in Florida, where we've built a portfolio as well, you have to be careful because when you buy that property for $2 million more than that previous owner, the taxes immediately go up based on
Hmm.
that new purchase. So any investors out there really have to do what you were explaining
Hmm.
when you're analyzing, underwriting that purchase, is to call that assessor and see what those taxes are going to escalate to, because that's the real expense on that
Yeah.
tax line item of that budget. And getting back to you getting out of state and finding deals out there, it sounds like I know you said you mentioned getting a deal based on another podcaster. Do
Hmm.
you depend on basic networking and just getting to meet many more people to find different deals in these different states?
Yeah, it's kind of a combination of networking, and then I've also three properties that I have actually came from turnkey providers. And again, kind of going back to the vetting, where I won't name names, but I think we all know in the industry some providers that are less than ethical and maybe having some legal challenges. But same as with anything else, did a pretty serious vetting of them, visited them in person. The nice thing I like about with the turnkey model is, one, everything's taken care of, but then two, then you can actually, kind of gives you more avenues to grow and expand. And even some that I work with, kind of back to like we said with the networking, they're starting to have investors come in and it's like, well, I'm thinking about selling my property. And the first person they go to is their property management or the turnkey company, and a lot of times it becomes more of an internal, like, hey, is anyone interested in this before it hits the MLS?
It's all about being that first person that gets the call when something
Exactly,
is
yeah.
being sold. Yep. They're just gonna go down that list. So you
So,
caught my attention with the Arizona condo being a short-term rental. I started my first short-term rental a couple months ago, and I love the space. I really enjoy providing that service and communicating with these tenants and having a spot where they can go to vacation. Tell us more about your experience being a short-term rental host in Arizona.
sure. So yeah, like I said, it was just one and or just one that we have, and kind of started out. Like I said, my wife's got family down in Arizona. We'd go down once or twice a year. We're kicking around. It's like, well, it'd be nice to have a place to stay versus constantly getting a hotel. And kind of back to the networking piece, it just happened to be a friend of a friend that knew my father-in-law. They just happen to be talking. It's like, oh yeah, let's give Cal a call. I know he's been looking to sell his condo, but he doesn't want to deal with you know, listing on the MLS, deal with real estate agents, etc. And so this was a off market deal. We bought fully furnished for 165,000, 2019. Based on comps, it's about doubled in value since then. And same thing. I mean, I know a lot of people talk using Airbnb and yeah, Propertyware and other management portals. I still like having a property management company, in place. Obviously, they charge more for short term versus long term, but the management company, kind of back to having always more than one in your pocket. The first one we ended up firing. The second one has a lot of connections with the traveling nurses and insurance adjusters that constantly need a furnished place for a month, 2, 3, maybe 4 months, and that has worked out really well. We actually had a record year in 2021. Obviously after COVID, but then 2022, I think we'll even break the revenue record from last year.
Now, does the condo have an HOA?
It does have an HOA, yeah. So
Are
it's
you worried at all about the HOA not allowing short term in the future?
no, they've kind of back to the vetting of it. I actually sat down or went to Arizona, sat in on the HOA meetings. They actually have several short term rentals in the complex. They run I don't want to say they run a tight ship, but they're just like, hey, we definitely allow it. We only allow up to, I know it's a certain percentage of short term rentals. Pretty hands off. They're just like, let us know who's staying there. We just need the license, make, model of the vehicles that are there. Even talking to other residents that rent out their properties, they haven't had any issues. And the nice thing about it with the short term, you can be a little bit shall we say, pickier of who you rent to, where a lot of the, I don't want to say you're going to discriminate, but you can really dive down and, kind of eliminate some of the riffraff, like, not renting to college students, for instance, if they just want to go for a week and have a party. We also try to keep the stays to a week or longer. Where the recently with Airbnb, when the 1 or 2 night or weekend stays tend to be just partiers, and now they got the ban across all Airbnb properties with that.
Yeah, so that comes down to having a property manager that knows what they're doing with this
Mm-hmm.
short-term rental. And one thing that I'm not a short-term rental guy at this point, but I do know that it's important for people to make sure when they're ready to buy a property to make sure that it's certain that it's permitted in that area
Mm-hmm.
for a short-term rental. I know that I have one that would work fantastically in Bel Air Bluffs, right outside Clearwater in Florida, but that particular neighborhood, you have to have it any tenant there at least 30 days,
Oh,
which
sure.
really takes you into that longer term rental market. Does your property manager utilize a lot of the current technology to make the short term rentals um, more or less time consuming? Cameras, online rental payments, security deposits, stuff like that?
Yeah, pretty much their whole operations through their online portal, and obviously utilizing technology from Bookerville, and we get ACH to payments of the net deposits. They do a pretty stringent check on the tenants, and obviously keep an eye out on the market of what the 1 day rate in the middle of the summer is versus the 1 week rate in December. And ironically, we're still slightly under market rents at the moment, which we still cash flow nice. We actually have a returning renter. They're coming back for 5 months, and so we raised the rent again by another $200-300 a month. So we're getting close to $3,000 a month, and we're still under market, but that 5 month stay more than pays for our entire year of expenses.
That's great. What I see here is you hire a manager to be that buffer, but you still know the numbers. You're
Mm-hmm.
going through these properties, knowing the numbers, knowing the tenants, and you almost as if you were the manager, but you had that manager in place to save you time. But some investors want to hire a manager and be completely passive,
Mm-hmm.
and that's just not the way to do it. You're not gonna get all of the juice out of the squeeze if you're not knowing the numbers and staying on top of it yourself.
Mm-hmm. Well, I just look at it's more of a, I don't view it as an expense, so to speak, with the property management. I view it as, hiring another member of the team that has more expertise and more connections than I do. So I look at it more of an investment than just, oh, gee, I'm paying this property manager 10% a month or whatever it comes to.
Absolutely. We've gone over, I think, a good overview of your portfolio here, but I'm still curious about your wealth and freedom nexus business. Sounds like you have an entire education platform podcast. Tell us more about that.
Sure. So yeah, that was kind of a little brainchild, if you will. I was kicking around and then launched in early 2020. One was trying to think of a name that obviously the domain existed for, but I kind of looked at holistically of thinking back to when we were, the proverbial when we were kids, we had a lot of freedom. We had summers off, weekends, holidays, etc. But I don't think any of us really had any wealth. And likewise, later on, and I was in that position before too, where you might have a lot of income, a high income, or a lot of wealth, but you don't have a lot of freedom. The second you stop working, your income comes to a complete stop. And I looked at it's like, well, the nexus or connecting point really between those two is passive income, what constantly comes in 24/7. So I created my website, Wealth and Freedom Nexus, just to share my journey, investments that I've partaken in, everything from turnkey providers like we talked about to various stock option strategies. And then as time went on, then I kind of morphed into a YouTube channel, and then launched a podcast of my own back in November of 2021, which, as of this recording, about a week ago, finally crossed 10,000 downloads. So,
Awesome. Well, congratulations. We got to check that out.
thanks.
Everybody check out that podcast and your platform there. Um, Knowing that we're in this interesting time, I guess it's always interesting times, but right
Yeah.
now the focus is higher interest rates, high
Hmm.
inflation. You're getting residential style mortgages. What are your thoughts on your growth over the next year or two based on our current environment?
As far as growth, like I said, my plan is for 2023, to do a large portfolio refinance. Running the quick and dirty numbers, probably looks like I can get out at least 100,000 of cash to redeploy. Obviously, people are always worried about rates. It's like, well, what if rates go up? And yeah, there's that. That's always going to be out there, but at the same token, a lot of my properties have appreciated. The rents go up every single year. And when you're looking at your portfolio, and this property has 25 years left on the payment schedule, this one has 8 years, this one has 15. When you're refinancing that all into a 30-year fixed mortgage, I kind of ran the numbers. I think the rate can almost go to 12%, and I'd be at the same monthly payment as I am now across my portfolio. So, you know, the rates are obviously important, but I think at the end of the day, it just comes down to, running the numbers. Does it make sense to harvest equity so it isn't, at the mercy of the market? And, rather having debt equity sitting in one property, I'd like to have that redeployed somewhere else, whether that's a new build fourplex in Florida or a new, uh, syndication in Texas or wherever the case may be. And like you said, it's always kind of interesting times, but I think there's always opportunity out there. You just have to look for it and be diligent.
No, I agree. I agree. It's just it's hard not to focus on that where we understand that value and being able to refinance and utilize that cash out for another
Hmm.
investment, but to psychologically process going from 3.5% to 5%, it's certainly
Right.
a hurdle to climb.
Hmm.
We're all in that position right now. We've got deals now where we forecasted to be able to reposition after a year or two and then refinance. So we're all in with that same challenge. But I agree. There's way too much value in getting that cash out so you can redeploy that into that next great opportunity.
Hmm.
I heard you say the syndication. Are you right now just in joint ventures with you and your wife, or do you plan on being a sponsor on syndications? Any interest there?
So the syndications I'm in, and taking a step back, unfortunately, a lot of syndications I'm not able to partake in because I'm not an accredited investor at this point. So obviously, the 506B or the Reg A is kind of what I gotta focus on. Right, wrong, or different. Most that come my way seem to be 506C. That being said, a bulk of them I currently invest in through my self-directed retirement account. As far as raising money on my own, I've certainly kicked it around, but I'm not naive. I know there's a lot of paperwork and regulations involved in that. I know the real estate guys put on a seminar, secrets to successful syndication. That's probably something I'll check out a later time to see if I want to do this, or maybe I'm perfectly fine with just being a limited partner. Of if there's people out there, it's like, hey, I got the deal, I just don't have the money. It's like, well, I got the money, you got the deal, you got the expertise. Let's work together. So
No, fantastic. Well, we're always doing deals. I'm general partner on some syndications, and I'll certainly get you right in the database. You're a limited partner, and you're
perfect.
happy with that position. So we always have fantastic deals to discuss with you, John. This is
All
the
right. Yeah, appreciate it.
Collecting Real Estate podcast. They say you have to have three of something to make a collection. So we have three questions to wrap up this episode. Number one,
Okay.
in 5 words or less, what's the most important thing you've learned since you started collecting real estate?
Where's there less? Um, takes longer than you think. I think that's fine.
Wow, as you know, this yeah,
That works.
it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Yeah. Yeah, I think a
I
lot of
can
people just think
certainly
like, oh, I'm
attest.
going to get this big deal and I'm going to be a multimillionaire and 12 months from now I'll be financially free. It's like, well, you might get lucky, but no, like you said, it's a marathon, not a sprint.
Get rich
Yeah,
slow scheme.
you
Yep.
said it. You said it very well. Some people do fall into the right spot at the right time, but yeah, it's a deal by deal process, and after doing 15, 20, 30 deals, then you can start to see some major fruits of all that labor. Question
Hmm.
2 for you: your 1 to 2 year personal goals.
1 and 2 year personal goals. Um,
Yes, please.
kind of a mix of personal and business, but I'm actually a new father, so I just kind of want to be the best dad that I can be, and obviously start him early with investing, and might need to learn to be potty trained first, but if I figure if I can start him early. Also want to look into more international, where uh, kind of the short term rental market, starting to see deals from Belize, Panama, Nicaragua, and wanting to it's like, all right, I've done good with other outside states. Let's take the next hurdle. Let's look at another country, and obviously, could lead to other benefits like, residency or citizenship of another country. So,
Oh, interesting. That's a new one. I love that. Last question for you is: how can we and the listeners assist you, and how do we contact you?
So the easiest way to contact me, interesting tidbit, there's only 3 Rickgarns in the world. So if you just go to rickgarn.com, they'll redirect you to my website, all my links. John at wealthandfreedomnexus.com is my email. Otherwise, just Google me, LinkedIn, Facebook. I'm right, wrong, or indifferent. I'm not too hard to find. I'm not a John Smith or a Jim Johnson or anything like that. As far as assisting, I'm always open to real estate discussions. Love talking to people about real estate if they want to ping ideas off of whether it's a partnership or investment opportunity, or podcast swap space. Talking up other podcasts, or even just like I said, I'm not an accredited investor right now, so I like to hear more and more about 506B and Reg A opportunities, which obviously just come through more of word of mouth networking, and having a great network that can bring those deals to you.
Awesome. No, I appreciate that. We appreciate you having you on the show. And everyone, please go and check out the Wealth and Freedom Nexus podcast in all of John's platforms. Thanks again, John.
Yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.